The beginning of the impossible. The stars sparkled in the endless void of space, silent and cold, stretching for eternity. The galaxy, once filled with wonder and hope, was now overshadowed by an unstoppable force, the Zenter Dominion, an empire so vast and powerful that no civilization had ever managed to challenge it. Entire worlds had fallen to their might, their once thriving populations reduced to mere memories. The Zenter fleet cruised from one star system to the next, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. But on the edges of this empire, far away from the chaos, there was a small human warship, the Phoenix, a vessel unlike any other in the galaxy. Old and battered, yet a symbol of the one thing the Zenter Empire could never understand: human determination. It was a single ship, nothing compared to the massive fleets of the Zenter, but the crew aboard was different. They had something no other army could replicate: a fierce desire to protect their home. Captain Evelyn Drake, the commander of the Phoenix, stood on the bridge, gazing at the stars. Her face was calm, yet her eyes betrayed the weight she carried. She had seen countless battles, led her crew through the darkest of times. But this was different. Word had come from Earth. The Zenter fleet was on its way, and they were bringing everything. "Captain," a voice broke through her thoughts. Lieutenant Marcus, her second in command, stood beside her. His face was pale, his usual confidence shaken. He handed her a data pad, and as she read the message, her heart sank. The Zenter fleet wasn't just coming for Earth. They were coming to wipe humanity out entirely. The message confirmed it. The Zenter Dominion had launched an invasion force so large that no one, not even the greatest warlords, could ever hope to defeat them. The numbers were staggering: dozens of dreadnoughts, hundreds of destroyers, and thousands of soldiers. The message was clear: this was the end of the human race. "Do we have a chance?" Marcus asked, his voice low. Captain Drake looked up, her expression steely. "We always have a chance. As long as we're breathing, we fight." The Phoenix wasn't ready for battle. Its engines were old, its weapons limited, and its crew was small compared to the mighty Zenter forces. But Evelyn Drake had seen worse. She had led her crew through impossible odds before. This time, though, the stakes were higher than ever. Earth's survival depended on their success. "We don't have much time," she said, her voice firm. "Prepare the crew. We'll need every single one of them to fight like never before. No matter what, we protect Earth." As the crew rushed to their posts, Evelyn felt a sense of unease. The Phoenix was the only thing standing between Earth and total annihilation. But what could one ship do against an empire that had crushed so many others? The thought lingered in her mind, but she pushed it aside. There was no room for doubt. Not now. The ship's engines hummed to life as the Phoenix slowly left its station. The vastness of space stretched out before them, an empty canvas. Behind them, Earth sat like a glowing jewel in the dark abyss, unaware of the storm that was coming. The Zenter fleet was already on their way, and they would be in Earth's orbit within hours. Captain Drake felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, heavier than any battle armor. Earth's future rested in her hands, in the hands of her crew. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and outclassed. But they weren't giving up. As the Phoenix moved deeper into space, the ship's communications officer, Ensign Lucy Carter, called out, her voice trembling. "Captain, we've received a transmission from the Zenter fleet. They're threatening Earth. They demand immediate surrender, or they will destroy every city, every last human." Evelyn stared at the screen. The image of a Zenter general appeared. His alien features were cold and emotionless, his voice filled with arrogance. "Surrender now, and we will grant your species mercy. Resist, and we will erase you." There was a long silence before Captain Drake's voice cut through the tension. "We don't surrender," she said, her words simple but powerful. "Prepare for battle." The crew exchanged nervous glances, but none of them faltered. They knew what they had to do. There would be no backing down. This was their home, and they would fight for it, no matter the cost. As the Phoenix neared the edge of the Zenter fleet's range, Evelyn made her final preparations. The ship was ready, even if it didn't seem like it. The crew was ready, even if they didn't know how. And Earth, that bright blue planet floating in the distance, was about to become the stage for humanity's greatest battle. The Zenter Empire had never met anything like this before. The Phoenix was ready to face the impossible. A glimmer of hope. The Phoenix drifted through space, its engines humming softly as it approached the immense Zenter fleet. The silence on the bridge was almost deafening, broken only by the occasional beeping of the ship's systems. Captain Evelyn Drake stood at the front, her fingers clenched tightly around the railing. Her crew was nervous, but they didn't dare show it. This was a battle that no one should have had to fight, yet here they were, preparing to face the most powerful empire the galaxy had ever seen. "Captain," Lieutenant Marcus said, his voice strained, "our sensors are picking up the full Zenter fleet. It's massive. They've already started forming up around Earth." Evelyn nodded, her gaze fixed on the display screen. Hundreds of Zenter warships, large and imposing, filled the vastness of space. The fleet was organized in a perfect formation, clearly indicating their military precision. They were ready to wipe out Earth with just a single strike. "We've been outgunned since the start," Marcus continued. "We don't even have enough missiles to make a dent in that fleet, not with the Phoenix alone." Evelyn turned to him, her face determined. "We don't need to make a dent. We need to survive long enough to find an opening. The Zenter may have the numbers, but we have something they don't." Marcus raised an eyebrow, confused. "What's that, Captain?" "Human ingenuity," Evelyn replied, her voice firm. "We'll fight with every last ounce of strength we have, and we'll make them pay for every inch of space they try to take from us." As she spoke, Ensign Lucy Carter called out from the communication station. "Captain, I'm getting a transmission from Earth Command. They're sending us coordinates for the planet's defense stations, but they're requesting we hold our position for now. They're working on a coordinated counterattack." Evelyn hesitated for a moment. Earth's defense stations were powerful, but they were nowhere near as advanced or as numerous as the Zenter fleet. Her mind raced, searching for any advantage she could leverage. There was no time to wait for reinforcements. The Phoenix was Earth's only line of defense, and she would have to make the most of it. "We can't afford to wait," she said, turning to her crew. "We need to engage them before they can establish a complete blockade around Earth. I'm not going to let them destroy everything we fought for. Prepare the ship for evasive maneuvers, and ready all remaining weapons. We'll hit them fast and hard." The crew sprang into action, each member knowing their role. Even though morale was low, they had no choice but to fight. They were the last line of defense between Earth and total annihilation. With a deep breath, Captain Drake looked out at the vast Zenter fleet ahead of them. They were huge, overwhelmingly so. The odds were against them, but Evelyn refused to back down. The Phoenix was her ship, her crew, and her responsibility. It didn't matter that they were outnumbered. It didn't matter that they were facing a force that could destroy entire civilizations with ease. She was human, and no empire, no matter how mighty, could extinguish that spark of defiance. "Let's show them what humanity is made of," Evelyn said, her voice cold with resolve. The Phoenix shot forward, leaving Earth behind. The Zenter fleet was close now, their warships looming larger with every passing moment. The battle was about to begin. As the ship surged toward the enemy, Chief Engineer Joshua Marks radioed in, his voice tinged with anxiety. "Captain, the main thrusters are running at full capacity. If we push them any harder, we risk damaging the engines." "We don't have a choice, Joshua," Evelyn responded, the urgency in her voice unmistakable. "Just keep it running as long as you can." The Phoenix hurtled toward the Zenter fleet at incredible speed, and the crew braced for the inevitable clash. Weapons systems powered up, and the ship's shields flickered to life. The Zenter fleet still hadn't noticed them yet, but it wouldn't be long before they did. Captain Drake could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. If they didn't act now, the battle would be over before it had even begun. "Captain, enemy ships are locking onto us," Lucy Carter called out. "They're about to fire. Hold on, everyone," Evelyn ordered, slamming her hand down on the console. "We're going in fast and hitting hard. All guns, target the nearest destroyer. Full power to the weapons." The first Zenter ship fired, a massive blast of energy that streaked toward the Phoenix. The ship rocked, but its shields held, only briefly flickering under the intense energy. "Return fire," Captain Drake shouted. The Phoenix fired its own weapons, the energy pulses lighting up the vast emptiness of space. The first Zenter destroyer was struck hard, its shields flaring as the blast hit. The Phoenix swerved sharply to avoid another incoming blast, narrowly dodging it. The Zenter fleet had finally noticed them, and the battle was on. The Phoenix was small compared to the Zentar warships, but its crew had something that the Zenter did not: courage, creativity, and the will to survive. With every strike, they showed the galaxy that even the smallest spark could set a fire. Even a lone warship could defy the might of an empire. Evelyn watched the first few moments of the battle unfold, her heart pounding in her chest. The odds were still stacked against them, but there was one thing the Zenter didn't understand. Humanity would never give up without a fight. "Keep pushing forward," Evelyn said, her voice full of determination. "This fight is just beginning." The first strike. The battle raged on, a chaotic dance of energy blasts, flashing weapons, and twisted metal. The Phoenix darted through space, its nimble frame a stark contrast to the massive Zenter warships that filled the sky. The Zenter fleet was relentless, firing massive beams of energy that tore through space with devastating power. Every strike sent shudders through the hull of the Phoenix, but the crew held fast. Captain Evelyn Drake stood at the helm, her eyes sharp and focused. "Fire at will," she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. The crew responded immediately, their hands moving in perfect synchronization. Despite being vastly outnumbered, they had one advantage the Zenter did not: speed. The Phoenix was built for agility, and it could weave in and out of enemy fire with precision, striking the enemy where it hurt. Ensign Carter, stationed at the communications panel, yelled across the bridge, "Captain, the Zenter flagship is entering range. They're targeting us directly." Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. The flagship was the most powerful vessel in the fleet. Its size alone was enough to instill fear in any opponent. If the Phoenix couldn't take it down, Earth would have no chance. "We'll take it head-on," Evelyn said firmly, setting her jaw. "Target their engines. If we can disable them, the rest of the fleet will be less coordinated." A moment of silence hung in the air as everyone on the bridge focused intently on their tasks. The Zenter flagship was enormous, a massive, heavily armored ship bristling with weapons. It was almost impossible to believe that the Phoenix, so small in comparison, had any hope of surviving this encounter. But Evelyn knew that if they didn't at least try, they would lose everything. "Captain," Lieutenant Marcus called out, "they've locked onto us with their heavy weapons. They're going to fire." Evelyn didn't flinch. "Evasive maneuvers, now," she ordered. The Phoenix swerved sharply to the right, just as the first blast from the Zenter flagship's weapons lanced across space. It missed by mere inches, and the ship was sent into a sharp roll to avoid the follow-up shots. The bridge rattled as the ship's hull was struck by a smaller blast. The shields held, but the Phoenix groaned under the stress. "Shields are holding for now," said Carter, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "Good," Evelyn said. "Keep them up as long as you can. Full power to the weapons. Target their engines again. We need to take out their propulsion systems, or we won't stand a chance." The Phoenix hurtled toward the flagship, weaving between blasts and making every maneuver count. The crew was pushing the ship to its limits, knowing that they couldn't afford any mistakes. The Zenter flagship loomed closer, its weapons charging for another devastating strike. Firing range in 10 seconds, Marcus shouted, his hands flying over the control panel. "Steady," Evelyn said, her voice barely above a whisper. The tension was thick on the bridge. Time seemed to slow as the Phoenix drew closer to its target. Finally, the moment arrived. "Fire," Evelyn ordered. The Phoenix fired a barrage of energy blasts at the Zenter flagship, the ship's guns roaring as they launched their payload. The enemy flagship's shields shimmered as they absorbed the blows, but the Zenter had clearly underestimated the human ship's resolve. A lucky shot struck the flagship's lower engines, and the massive ship shook violently. The Zenter flagship faltered, its engines sputtering as they began to fail. The bridge of the Phoenix erupted in cheers, but Evelyn's face remained stoic. "Don't get cocky," she said sharply. "They'll retaliate soon. Prepare for their counterattack." Just as she spoke, the Zenter flagship unleashed a barrage of plasma missiles. The Phoenix barely managed to dodge the first wave, but the second wave caught the ship off guard. The hull shuddered again as the ship was struck by one of the missiles. The shields flickered, but they held. The Phoenix had taken its first hit, and the crew knew they were in for more. "Damage report," Evelyn demanded. "Minor hull breach on Deck 3, Lieutenant Marcus reported. "Shields are at 60%. We're holding, but barely." "Good," Evelyn said. "We can't afford to let up. Target their main weapons array next. Take out their ability to fight back." As the Phoenix repositioned itself for another strike, the Zenter flagship retaliated. Another blast slammed into the ship, but this time the Phoenix was ready. It swerved and twisted, evading the incoming shots and returning fire with precision. The battle was fierce, but the Phoenix's quick thinking and human ingenuity were paying off. "We've got a weak spot," shouted Chief Engineer Joshua Marks. "The flagship's shields are failing on the starboard side. If we hit it now, we can cripple their power." "Do it," Evelyn said without hesitation. "Fire everything we've got." The Phoenix unleashed all its remaining energy in a final desperate strike, targeting the vulnerable side of the Zenter flagship. The enemy ship's shields crackled and then collapsed under the intense bombardment. For a brief moment, there was silence, and then the flagship's engines exploded in a brilliant burst of light. The massive Zenter ship drifted, crippled, into space. "We did it," Carter shouted, her voice full of disbelief. Evelyn took a deep breath, her body still tense from the fight. "Not yet. We've only just begun." As the Zenter flagship drifted helplessly in space, the rest of the fleet began to regroup, clearly shaken by the sudden loss of their most powerful ship. The Phoenix had delivered a crippling blow, but the battle was far from over. "Prepare for another attack," Evelyn ordered, her eyes narrowed in focus. "We've made them bleed, but the fight isn't finished. Not until Earth is safe." The crew was already in motion, knowing that the next wave would come soon. And this time, they would be ready. Outnumbered, outclassed, and determined, the Phoenix hovered on the edge of the battlefield, battered and scarred from the intense confrontation. The Zenter flagship had been dealt a crushing blow, but that was only one ship in a fleet of hundreds. The rest of the Zenter forces were regrouping, their battle tactics shifting to focus on overwhelming the lone warship. Captain Evelyn Drake stood at the helm, eyes locked on the enemy fleet as it began to reorganize. The Zenter ships, now more cautious after the loss of their flagship, were forming a tighter, more aggressive formation. Evelyn's mind raced. The Phoenix couldn't take another direct hit like that. They were running out of time, out of options, and out of fuel. But giving up wasn't in her nature. It wasn't in the crew's nature. "Captain, the Zenter are adjusting their positions," Marcus reported, his voice tinged with urgency. "They're concentrating their firepower on us. They know we're the only real threat left." Evelyn nodded. "We need to keep them off balance. If they get organized, we're done. Give me full power to the engines. We'll use speed to our advantage. Hold steady," everyone. The Phoenix surged forward, dodging a barrage of enemy fire, its engines roaring as the ship darted in and out of the center formations. The crew worked seamlessly, their movements sharp and synchronized as they prepared for the next strike. Enemy cruisers closing in. Carter shouted from her station, eyes wide. "They're going to box us in." "Not if I can help it," Evelyn replied, her fingers dancing across the console. "We'll break through. Take out their smaller ships first. They're less armored but faster." The Phoenix fired again, its weapons tearing into the smaller center cruisers that attempted to surround them. The enemy ships exploded in brilliant fireballs, their destruction sending shockwaves through the surrounding vessels. But as quickly as they were eliminated, more took their place. The Zenter were relentless. "Shields are at 40%, Marcus reported, his voice strained. "We're taking hits from all sides." Evelyn's face was set in a determined line. "We've been hit before. We'll survive this too. Focus on the bigger ships. If we can take them out, the smaller ones won't stand a chance." The Phoenix launched another barrage, targeting the larger Zenter cruisers with deadly precision. The crew worked tirelessly, pushing their ship beyond its limits. Every shot, every maneuver was calculated, but Evelyn knew it wouldn't be enough for much longer. The Zenter fleet was closing in, and they were running low on options. "Captain," Carter said, her voice tight with tension, "the Zenter flagship is reactivating its engines. They're trying to regroup." Evelyn didn't hesitate. "We're not letting them get back in the fight. Full power to the forward guns. We need to hit them while they're weak." The Phoenix turned sharply, positioning itself for another direct attack on the disabled flagship. They had the chance now, with the Zenter flagship vulnerable and unable to retaliate with its full might. This was their opportunity to land a final blow. The Phoenix's weapons lit up the dark expanse of space as it closed in on its target. The Zenter flagship, still struggling to stabilize, fired back weakly, but it was no match for the Phoenix's concentrated fire. The Phoenix hit it hard, and the flagship's shields flickered and collapsed. A final, powerful blast tore through its core, and the massive ship erupted in a fiery explosion. "Direct hit," Marcus called out. "The flagship is gone." Evelyn allowed herself a brief moment of relief. The loss of the flagship had thrown the Zenter into disarray. Their organized formations began to fall apart, their movements becoming less coordinated. But Evelyn knew they weren't out of danger yet. The Zenter were still powerful, and the remaining fleet would stop at nothing to destroy them. The Phoenix had been through a lot, but the crew's resolve was unwavering. They had fought against impossible odds and had already struck 2 deadly blows to the Zenter forces. But if they were to win, they would need more than just courage and luck. They would need to outsmart the enemy. Evelyn looked over at her crew. The exhaustion was evident on their faces, but there was something else: determination. The fight wasn't over, and they weren't going to stop until Earth was safe. "Hold steady, everyone," Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion weighing on her. "We've taken down their flagship, but there's still a fight left to win. We're going to hit them harder. We got one shot left to take this empire down." "Captain," Carter called from her station, "we've got one more surprise for them. The Zenter fleet is coming in for a final strike, but we've got a chance to hit them where it hurts." Evelyn turned to her with a sharp gaze. "What do you have in mind, Ensign?" "We can use the debris field from the flagship's destruction," Carter said, a spark of hope in her voice. "We can create an obstacle, force them to break formation. It'll give us a chance to pick off their weaker ships and escape." Evelyn thought for a moment, considering the plan. It was risky, but it might be their only chance. "Do it. We'll buy ourselves a little more time." With a series of calculated commands, the Phoenix maneuvered the debris from the destroyed flagship to create a dangerous maze of obstacles. The Zenter fleet, still reeling from their earlier losses, hesitated just long enough to allow the Phoenix to make its move. "Time to finish this," Evelyn said quietly, as the Phoenix powered up for one last attack. The Phoenix surged forward again, determined to give everything they had left. The fate of Earth rested in their hands. Turning the tide, the Phoenix darted through the debris field, its engines roaring as the crew maneuvered the ship with precision. The Center fleet, disoriented by the massive destruction of their flagship, was struggling to reform their lines. The debris field they were forced to navigate provided the perfect cover for the Phoenix. Each obstacle blocked their view, making it harder for the Center ships to focus their fire. Captain Evelyn Drake's fingers moved rapidly over the controls, her mind calculating every second, every maneuver. The Center fleet had been weakened, but the threat was still overwhelming. They might have taken down the flagship, but there were hundreds of ships left, and the Phoenix was running on fumes. "Captain," Marcus said, his voice tight with focus, "our shields are at 30%. We can't keep dodging forever." Evelyn didn't need to hear that to know the truth. She could feel the strain in the ship's movements, the signs of wear and tear in every groan of the hull. But they weren't backing down. She had led them this far, and she wasn't about to stop now. "We just need to keep pushing," Evelyn replied, her voice unwavering. "We're going to break them. We're going to make them understand that humanity doesn't back down, no matter how impossible the odds." As the Phoenix navigated through the debris, they found a gap in the Center formation. It was a brief opening, a tiny vulnerability in the fleet's defense. Evelyn's eyes locked on it. "Now," she shouted, her hands slamming down on the controls. "All weapons, fire at will." The Phoenix's guns erupted with a blast of energy, hitting the first Center ship in their line of sight. It was a smaller cruiser, but the hit was devastating. The Phoenix was relentless in its barrage, using every weapon at its disposal to strike down the enemy. The crew worked in perfect synchrony, each member giving everything they had. "Direct hit on their cruiser," shouted Carter, her face flushed with excitement. "One down." Evelyn allowed herself a brief smile, but the battle was far from over. The Center fleet, though shaken, was quick to retaliate. One of the remaining destroyers locked onto the Phoenix and fired a massive energy beam. The ship rocked under the force of the blast, and the shields flickered dangerously. Shields at 15%, hull integrity at 70%. Marcus reported, his voice strained. "We need to back off." Evelyn's mind raced, calculating their options. There was no room to retreat, no way to run. Earth was still at risk, and they had to keep pushing. She took a deep breath and made the decision. "We're not running," she said firmly. "Prepare for one final push. Target their command ships. If we take out their leadership, the rest of the fleet will fall apart." The Phoenix surged forward again, dodging blasts as they tore through the Center defenses. This time, their target was clear. The heart of the Center fleet. It was a large command ship, heavily armored but vulnerable in its center. "Fire all forward weapons," Evelyn barked. The ship's cannons unleashed a concentrated blast of energy, targeting the command ship's weak spots. The Center retaliated quickly, launching a barrage of missiles in their direction. The Phoenix swerved to avoid the missiles, but the strain on the ship was immense. The next few seconds felt like an eternity as they closed in on the target. "Almost there," Marcus muttered under his breath, his hands working the controls with speed and precision. The Phoenix was within range now. They had to hit the command ship in the next few seconds or risk being overwhelmed by the remaining Center forces. "Ready," shouted Carter from her station. Firing. The Phoenix's guns flared to life once more, unleashing an all-out assault on the command ship. The barrage hit its mark. The Center ship's shields shattered under the barrage, and explosions ripped through its structure. A few moments later, the ship exploded in a massive burst of light, sending shockwaves through the remaining Center forces. "Direct hit. Command ship down," Marcus called out, disbelief in his voice. Evelyn grinned, but it was a grim grin. They had hit their target, but they weren't out of danger yet. The remaining Center ships began to falter, their formations breaking apart as confusion spread. Without their command ship to guide them, The Zenter fleet was struggling to regroup. "We've got them on the ropes," Evelyn said, her voice steady. "Now finish this. All forward guns. Target the remaining battleships. We don't stop until they're gone." The Phoenix pushed forward once again, its weapons lighting up the darkness of space. The remaining Zenter ships, scattered and disorganized, were easy targets now. One by one, they fell under the relentless barrage from the Phoenix. The crew of the Phoenix knew they couldn't let up. Earth was still vulnerable, and the Zenter weren't defeated yet. But with every Zenter ship that exploded in the distance, the crew felt a surge of hope. They were winning. Against all odds, they were turning the tide. As the last Zenter battleship exploded in a fiery blaze, the crew erupted into cheers, their relief palpable. The Phoenix had done the impossible. They had struck down an empire. Evelyn Drake stood tall, her eyes scanning the vast expanse of space, the remains of the Zenter fleet scattered around them. Her heart was still pounding in her chest, but there was a sense of finality now. "It's over," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've won." The crew looked at her, their faces filled with disbelief and exhaustion. The battle had been long, and it had taken everything from them, but they had won. Against the impossible, humanity had triumphed. The Phoenix had defeated an empire, and Earth was safe. For now. The final stand. The remnants of the Zenter fleet drifted in space, their ships broken and scattered, their once imposing might reduced to nothing more than debris. The Phoenix had delivered a decisive blow, but Evelyn Drake knew they couldn't stop yet. They had survived the impossible, but Earth was still at risk. The final act of this battle was coming, and it would be their greatest test yet. "Captain," Marcus said, his voice cautious, "we've taken down the flagship, shattered their command structure, but there's still a significant number of Zenter ships out there. They're regrouping faster than we anticipated." Evelyn's gaze fixed on the screen, watching as the remaining Zenter ships tried to reorganize, their remaining commanders struggling to fill the void left by their leader's destruction. Their fleet was broken, but not defeated. The Phoenix was battered, its shields barely holding at 15%, and its weapons nearly depleted. Time was running out for them, and they knew it. "We don't have much left," Evelyn muttered, more to herself than to the crew. But then her voice hardened with resolve. "We fight until the end. We finish this now." "Captain, incoming transmission from Earth Command," Carter called from the communications panel. "They're requesting status update. They're preparing the final planetary defenses, but they need to know if we can hold off the remaining fleet long enough." Evelyn took a deep breath, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision. Earth's survival depended on this moment. "We've come this far," she said, eyes locked onto the vast expanse of space. "Tell Earth Command to begin the final defense protocol. We'll hold them off. Just give us a little more time." Her voice rang out with determination, though every part of her body screamed in exhaustion. The Phoenix had fought longer and harder than any ship had any right to, but now the crew had one final mission to complete: to delay the remaining Zenter forces long enough for Earth's defenses to kick in. "All hands to battle stations," Evelyn commanded. "We make our stand here. No one leaves this ship until the job is done." The Phoenix surged forward again, its weapons barely functional but still capable of making a difference. The crew, despite their fatigue, were focused. They understood what was at stake. The Zenter fleet, now regrouped, was approaching in tight formations, their remaining ships determined to finish what they had started. "They're coming in fast," Marcus reported, his hands flying over the controls. "They're targeting us again, Captain. Full firepower on our position." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. The odds were insurmountable, but the Phoenix had faced impossible odds before. It was more than a warship now. It was a symbol of humanity's resolve, a testament to their refusal to give in. The battle was far from over, but this fight would define them. "Take them head on," Evelyn ordered, her voice calm but filled with a quiet ferocity. We hold them back as long as we can. We give Earth every second to prepare. The Phoenix took position in front of the oncoming fleet, a lone sentinel in the void. The Zenter ships fired first, massive energy beams slicing through space toward them. The Phoenix dodged and weaved, its remaining thrusters pushing it to its limits. The ship rocked under the barrage, its shields flickering dangerously, but it stayed intact. "We can't take many more of those," Carter shouted, her voice barely audible over the roar of the systems struggling to stay online. "We don't need to take them all," Evelyn said, determination in her voice. "We just need to hold them. Prepare for another barrage." The crew unleashed everything they had. The Phoenix fired every remaining weapon in its arsenal. Energy blasts lit up the darkness as the ship took aim at the largest of the remaining Zentaur warships. The blasts struck hard, punching through the shields of their target. The ship exploded into fragments, its destruction sending a ripple through the enemy lines. But the Zenter fleet wasn't deterred. They continued to press forward, relentless and unforgiving. Evelyn knew that this fight, though heroic, would likely be their last. The Phoenix was battered, its systems faltering. But the crew wasn't ready to give up. They couldn't. Not when Earth's future was on the line. "Another one incoming," Marcus yelled, his voice strained as his fingers moved quickly across the control panel. "It's a direct hit." Evelyn braced herself as the Phoenix absorbed the blow. The ship rocked violently, alarms blaring as the hull creaked and groaned. The shields flickered, barely holding together as they absorbed the blast. The Phoenix staggered, nearly losing control, but it remained on course. "We've got one more shot left," Evelyn said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We can do this." The Phoenix, crippled but unyielding, focused all its remaining power on the final Zentaur warship in their path. The crew was exhausted, their eyes bloodshot from the long hours of constant combat, but they worked as one, unified, determined, and unbroken. "Now," Evelyn shouted, "fire everything." The Phoenix unleashed one final, devastating barrage of energy, all focused on the remaining enemy ship. The blast hit with pinpoint accuracy, tearing through the Zenter ship's defenses. The Zentaur warship exploded in a massive burst of light, its destruction sending shockwaves through the remaining fleet. The Zenter forces, now leaderless and fractured, began to retreat. The Phoenix had done it. They had defeated the Empire. The bridge of the Phoenix was silent, save for the quiet hum of the systems. The crew stared at the empty space where the Zenter fleet had once been. It was over. Against impossible odds, humanity had won. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, her breath coming in slow, steady exhalations. She looked around at her crew, their faces tired but filled with the same sense of accomplishment she felt. They had done the impossible. "We did it," she said quietly. "We saved Earth." And with that, the Phoenix floated in the vastness of space, a lone warship among the stars, its mission complete. The galaxy would never forget the day when one brave warship took down an empire, when humanity's resilience defied all odds. Victory against all odds. The silence that followed the final battle was deafening. The remains of the Zenter fleet scattered in space, floating lifelessly in the void. The Phoenix, battered and bruised, drifted among the wreckage. Its hull was pocked with dents and scorch marks, its engines barely holding on, but it was still intact. The warship had withstood the impossible. And now, Earth was safe. Captain Evelyn Drake stood at the front of the bridge, her gaze fixed on the empty space ahead. She could hardly believe what they had just accomplished. They had taken on an empire, and they had won. Against all odds, humanity had survived. "Captain, Earth Command is requesting a status report," Marcus said, his voice a little weary but filled with relief. "They've detected the retreat of the remaining Zenter ships. They're asking if we need assistance." Evelyn paused for a moment, taking a slow breath. The crew had done their part, and now it was time to return home. "Tell them we've handled it," she said softly. a faint smile tugging at her lips. Earth is safe. No reinforcements needed. There was a moment of silence as everyone on the bridge absorbed the gravity of their victory. The battle was over. The war was won. It was hard to believe, but the crew of the Phoenix had done what no one thought possible. They had taken down the mighty Zentaur Empire. "Captain," Carter called, her voice trembling slightly. "We're receiving a message from Earth Command. They're thanking us. They're calling us heroes." Evelyn shook her head slightly, her eyes softening. "We didn't do it for the praise. We did it to protect our home. That's what matters." But as she said it, she couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. This crew, this ship, had defied all expectations. They had faced a force that had crushed entire civilizations, and they had stood strong. They had made humanity proud. "We'll be hailed as heroes," Marcus said with a slight chuckle, "whether we like it or not." Evelyn smiled, though there was no humor in it. "Let them. Earth deserves to know that we fought for them. That humanity fought for itself." The bridge fell silent again as the crew took in the gravity of their victory. They had lost so much during the battle, but they had gained so much more. Earth's future was secure, and humanity's resilience had been proven. They had withstood the storm and come out victorious. Evelyn stepped away from the command chair, her tired eyes sweeping over her crew. She could see the exhaustion on their faces, the weight of the battle still pressing on their shoulders. But she also saw something else, a deep sense of pride, of accomplishment, of unity. "We've all earned our rest," she said, her voice soft but firm. "But let's not forget, this victory wasn't just ours. It was everyone's, Earth's, humanity's, and every person who believes in the power of hope and strength." Marcus nodded, his eyes glowing with the fire of victory. "We made history today, Captain. The Zentaur Empire will never be the same. And neither will we." Evelyn turned to the view screen, staring at the stars in the distance. Earth was now safe, its future secure. The battle had been long, brutal, and costly, but it had been worth it. They had faced an empire that seemed invincible, and had crushed it. "Let's head home," Evelyn said, her voice filled with quiet satisfaction. "We've earned it." As the Phoenix turned towards Earth, the crew allowed themselves a moment to breathe. Their journey had been long and arduous, but it was over. The Zentaur Empire had been defeated, and humanity had emerged victorious. And though they knew the galaxy would remember them as heroes, the crew of the Phoenix would always know the truth. They had fought not for glory, not for fame, but for the survival of their world, for the survival of humanity. And that, in the end, was the greatest victory of all. With the Phoenix heading back home, the crew shared a quiet moment of reflection, knowing they had changed the course of history. The galaxy would never forget the day one brave warship stood alone against an empire and obliterated it. And humanity would never forget the strength that had come from the heart of Earth, the heart of humanity itself. The Phoenix had won, and the legacy of its crew would live on forever.